I'm a little bit under the weather, but that's okay. We have coffee. It's all fine. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. My name is Cassidy Cash. I suppose first I should explain why there's crayon marks on the wall behind me. We are moving my office. Stay tuned for the great reveal, but we are turning the upstairs bedroom into my office. And this one used to be my 3-year-old's room, and now there's flowers. The flowers were not his. I do have 2 boys, and the flowers were a feature of the house when we moved in here recently. And we just haven't painted over that because my 3-year-old thought they were so cool. So we kept those, and he decided since they had painted flowers on the wall, he could draw his own flowers. And so you'll see there's his flowers over there, and there's his flowers over here. Lovely. Coming at you live from the Pink Forest here today, I am Cassidy Cash. This week's question comes from a user online. Occasionally I go over and answer questions on Quora, and this was one of the ones that came from Quora, and it was prompted entirely by someone online who asked me and expected, it seems, that I would know the answer, so thank you very much for thinking that I would know. But this week's question is, did Shakespeare invent the letter Q? Thank you, Marion, for your belief that I can indeed rattle off 16th century linguistics, but I had to go and do some research into this question to find out exactly what prompted the asking of such a question, and then, of course, what the answer was. And here is what I found out. It turns out the Elizabethan alphabet only had 24 letters, when today we have 26. It's also true that in the history of the English language, we didn't always use the Q. So why would someone think that Shakespeare invented it? Well, let's start with the alphabet. There were 24 letters instead of 26, but that's not because there weren't the same sounds in English. Basically, there were 2 letters, or 4, I guess. There were 4 letters that doubled up. The I and the J were the same letter. So a lot of times when you're looking at Elizabethan documents, you'll see things spelled with a J when they're intended to make the same sound as an I. With the case of the U and the U was only used in the middle of a word, and the V would always come at the beginning. Another surprising fact about Elizabethan England that I discovered in doing this research is that they actually had a special letter that looks very much like a Y that they would use to make the th sound, the TH sound that makes words like thee. So sometimes you'll see ye written, but it actually means thee, which got me to wondering, it's possible that ye old pub is actually just the old pub and we're misinterpreting Elizabethan English. That's a question for another week. Continuing on with whether or not Shakespeare invented the letter Q. Now, you remember the I and J confusion. Well, this also caused confusion when you were writing Roman numerals, because Roman numerals rely pretty heavily on the letter I. For instance, when you have Henry VIII, it is V with 3 I's right after it. Well, in Elizabethan English, sometimes at the end of a Roman numeral, they would use a J instead of an I. So Henry VIII might be VIIJ. It's also true that Shakespeare was fond of inventing new words, but it wasn't something that was really unique to him. During this time period of the late 16th and early 17th century, playwrights and writers were a huge source of adding new words to the English language. In fact, the fact that William Shakespeare added a whole ton of them was very significant, but he wasn't the only one doing this. During this time period, the entire English language was growing by leaps and bounds. William Shakespeare himself is said to have contributed more than 2,000 words to the English language, including words like blushing, champion, circumstantial, critic, epileptic, elbow, frugal, generous, gossip, and scuffle, just to name a few. And English as a language wasn't formalized yet. The very first English dictionary would actually be written in Shakespeare's lifetime. It was written by Robert Cowdrey and came out in 1604 when William Shakespeare was 40 years old. Cowdrey was an educator, and so he wrote this to train the upcoming generations in grammar school how to speak what Cowdrey considered the mother tongue. It was basically, he wanted to write down the right way to speak English and encourage English-speaking children to learn it. Mr. Cowdrey was a little incensed by the international influence coming into England. A lot of the French and Italian and German influences were coming to England from the royals' various travels and bringing them back. As we've mentioned previously, this period in English history was very much focused on exploration and import-export. There's a big fascination with foreign products and foreign words, and it was very posh among the upper classes to borrow words from languages like French and Italian. So Cawdrey wrote his dictionary to try and say, here's what English is supposed to be. And that came out in 1604. So as you can see, during this time period, there was a big focus on words and how to use them. The lack of formalization in English meant that there was wide variation in spelling, which is why William Shakespeare himself has 9 different versions of spelling for his name. Now, when he would write his own name, used the phrase Shakespeare most often when he would write it, but on formal documents, it was spelled Shakespeare, the way that we spell it today. And some historians have pointed to that as a kind of error, but when you look at the linguistic history of England, it really wasn't so much an error as it was a cultural identity. This was how people wrote in the late 16th and 17th century. There wasn't a formalized spelling system. So to spell the same word 9 different ways was really how all their words worked. Now, in Shakespeare's lifetime, English words also had variation in meaning in addition to variation in spelling. For example, the word decline could mean to enumerate as opposed to simply to turn down or to say no to. So when you're reading through Shakespeare's plays, you have to understand something of the culture of the time, not just about what they ate or where they worked or how they lived, but also what their words meant. And Linda Alchin has combined this really cool English language dictionary, and her website has all kinds of notifications about how you're supposed to give her credit for this. And absolutely, she should receive it. So I am being very careful to say this is Linda Alchin's Elizabethan English resource, and I'll put the link in the show notes, but it's basically an online digital dictionary of words and what they meant in Shakespeare's time. Now, there's a lot of research that you can do, because when you look up the word decline, the example I gave you in this video comes from her online Elizabethan dictionary. But when you read through Shakespeare's plays and you use a concordance to go and look up various uses of the word decline, some of them really do mean to turn down. So I'm not sure if she's writing that decline only meant to enumerate, or if it could mean enumerate in addition to the way that we use it today. Lots more research available there, but definitely a good resource to check out. So go take a look at that. Did Shakespeare invent the letter Q? Well, no. He didn't. We can thank the French for introducing the Q into the English language. This influence heightened, no doubt, by things like Henry V having married Catherine Valois of France, Charles II, and all of this, not to mention just a general English fascination with all things French during this time period. The French used QU to represent the K plus W sound, that qu. Later, they would drop the W, but they didn't update the spelling, and so words like quiche would keep the K noise even though it had QU. The French get that KW sound and spelling it with a QW from Latin, which used a Q before a W sound and a C whenever they just wanted the K noise. That's the same influence you see in English, which before about 1066 has English spellers using words like queen and quick with a CWEN and CWIC. And when it comes to the actual letter Q, it turns out that this letter was already in the English language when Shakespeare arrived in the world, so he can't take credit for inventing that particular letter. He was just a master at using it to create new words. That's it for this week here at Did Shakespeare. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe. Every like and subscribe helps this video reach more people. And as Shakespeareans, we love our friends. So please hit like and become our friend. To learn more about me and what I do, you can check out my website to find free resources on Shakespeare, various articles that I've written on different publications. Check out the YouTube channel. Yes, there are more videos here, as well as to find out about the travel tours we take for your classroom or just your friends who want to learn about Shakespeare. We go to London and Stratford every year, and we put together custom tours for your classroom or your organization. So go to CassidyCash.com to find out more about those. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next week.